What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. I am here today to look ahead to PFL 7 2024, and I'm joined by my Sherdog.com colleague Mike Pendleton to look ahead to the card as well. Mike, you've been covering a lot of the PFL scene over the last while, like myself, for Sherdog. Are you excited about this card? I know you've talked to a lot of the fighters around this card and the upcoming cards as well. It's an exciting time if you're big into the PFL, isn't it?
I think if I do any more PFL coverage, it's going to go from Mike Pendleton to Mike P.F. Pendleton, and we'll just make do with that awful joke, and I'll stop my comedy career right here on this show. But no, I love it. I love covering PFL. I just hate when people go, I don't understand the point system. I don't understand this. It's so simple to figure out. It's one of the easiest things to figure out in combat sports. Let alone you're talking in the UFC about a guy maybe ranked 11th getting a title fight, and that makes more sense than the PFL point system. Okay, you can have that.
I also think a big thing about that, and I've mentioned the show a few times, I feel like everyone wants an alternative, but I'm not sure they know exactly what an alternative. And I know a lot of people want straight knockout, and that, you know, that could work or would work, but that's different to what they have at the moment. And the one thing I love about PFL, and it's, funnily enough, not necessarily true for this card we're about to talk about, but the semi-final stage is a bit of an odd stage, right? As we will allude to in a while, but every fight matters in the PFL, right? If you have, and maybe not necessarily every fight, but like, you know, you've 10 fights on the card, 8 of them have high jeopardy. There's people fighting that are 1, 2, 3 fights away from winning $1 million. That's absolutely huge, and just something that really the other promotions don't necessarily have. So I think if the PFL gave up that, they'd be giving up something massive. But maybe, look, that might be a discussion for another day. Just before we started, we kind of we touched on the heavyweights. And it's been a crazy year for the heavyweights, hasn't it? With like injuries and people pulling out and all of that. And, you know, what we're left with here is Denis Goltsov versus Tim Johnson. Tim Johnson obviously coming in for the last fight on short notice. And then Oleg Popov against Linton Vassell. Linton Vassell, who won his last fight but got eliminated, but is now back in because his opponent, Moldavsky, got injured. It's been a crazy year for the heavyweights, Mike, hasn't it?
One of the craziest, right? And it's like when people have things to say about PFL, it would be easy for them to be like, well, look at the PFL heavyweights. But if you just stop being negative all the time and find the beauty in combat sports, this is what I love. Linton Vassell, who I had a chance to talk to coming into this fight, he said it's perfect. It's almost poetic that he's filling in for the guy he beat. Like, you know, he beat Moldavsky. So if you don't understand the point system, just know that, especially at heavyweight, you stay ready, so you don't have to get ready. It's the, you know, worst cliche of all time. But that's truly how it worked out for him. And now he's got a fantastic. It is possibly Linton Vassell against Russia all year to get to a PFL world title and $1 million. So it's the crazy things have happened, but if we just look at this entire bracket, like you said, Tim Johnson gets the call on 2 weeks' notice. You know, the craziest first round we've seen all year in his PFL debut. And then Denis Goltsov, a guy who's been there but has never gotten over the hump. And Oleg Popov, a lot of people look at the record, but Linton Vassell and others have felt fully confident going in against him. So he's like that guy that people have false hope against. I think we've got some great narratives and some great matchups coming into this one.
100%. And maybe let's start off and talk about the main event and break that fight down a little bit. And it's like the goals of looking at these Sherdog. I always love to do this for these fights, especially. 34 wins in his career, 28 of them inside the distance. It's an unbelievable record for a guy who's only 34 years of age. For a heavyweight, that's a pup, really. And, you know, he's beaten Linton Vassell and Thiago Santos this year. As you said, didn't get over the hump. Lost to Hinan Fahea last year after being on a run of 5-6 wins in a row, where he beat the likes of Maurice Green and Cesar Fahea. You know, he'd lost Ante Delia in 2021. He lost Ali Asiev in 2019. It's been a mad run for him, but he's been a mainstay, I suppose, of that division. You know, since when did he make his debut? Back in 2019. He's had, you know, nearly 20 fights there for the PFL. probably up there with the most of anyone at this stage. And then Tim Johnson, I suppose, is on the opposite end of it. He's only had one fight in the PFL, and that was an absolute crazy one. But he has been everywhere else. Obviously we know he's been in the UFC, and he's been in Bellator, and funny enough, fought some of the guys who are obviously in the tournament. Fought Linton, Vassell, and Moldavsky, and beat Tyrell Fortune, who's obviously on this card as well. Beat Marcelo Golm. So it's funny. I spoke a lot this year about how it's very hard sometimes to analyze a lot of the fighters now, and analyze the matchup. Sorry, should I say? Because the crossover has kind of forced us to realign where we rank maybe these guys. It was easier to say how the Bellator guys would get on against the Bellator guys because they've all been fighting each other, or the PFL guys against the PFL guys, because for the most part, although it's a little bit different with the tournament, they have been fighting each other as well. But it's very much changed this year, although maybe it's coming to maybe that'll change once we come to the final and things. But for this fight, I think it's interesting that Tim Johnson is a guy we know at this stage of his career, 39 years of age. Look, he's probably on the last leg of the top level of his career. Maybe even a little bit surprised he got the chance with PFL, considering after his Bellator run, he fought in Extreme Fighting Championships, and it's, usually when that happens, you're not always getting back at 39, 38, 9 years of age, but he has gotten back, and he's nothing to lose here, Mike, does he? Like, for Tim Johnson, this is a case of go in, show those hands, and you're one punch away from $1 million if you win this fight. So it's massive for Tim Johnson, isn't it?
Tim Johnson is the beauty of heavyweight MMA, right? He could be hauling pigs, I think it was, or horses or cattle across the United States, get a phone call 2 weeks, prior to the fight, and to go, you're not just making weight, you're actually fighting. And, like, I had an opportunity to talk to him coming into this fight against Denis Goltsov, and he said, like, Denis is good. He's a B+, A- at everything, but not one specific thing stands out. And he also, in self-deprecating ways said, he loves upsetting the people who bet against him because he looks at that stuff. He feeds into that. But to be fair, people probably don't bet for him or against him because they don't know what Tim Johnson's going to show up, which he said is a fair assessment of his entire career. So I like how real he is about the opportunity. But when you look at Goltsov as well, here's a guy, especially lately, he hasn't lost to anyone but the very best. I think the issue with this heavyweight season, and it's nothing against the PFL, it's nothing against the fighters, Renan Ferreira has been put on ice for Francis Ngannou. Why wouldn't he? A great fight against, performance against Ryan Bader. He's a heavyweight champ last year. Let's keep that guy. He's a physical specimen. Can't really say the exact same about everybody else in this playoffs. No disrespect. But you want to keep Renan Ferreira and not jeopardize that fight for Francis Ngannou. So you haven't had the 2023 champion, like in other divisions, kind of poking around or been able to be defeated by someone during this regular season. So I think it's kind of a negative thing that Goltsov hasn't been able to, once again, either get that fight back against Ferreira, but he's only lost to the very best. And now with this influx of Bellator talent, we like you said, we kind of got to realign with where does this talent stack up? For my money's worth, Linton Vassell was a top heavyweight in Bellator for quite some years. And yeah, his run didn't start off very well, but we're not there yet. We're talking about Denis Goltsov and Tim Johnson. It would seem on paper that Denis Goltsov should win this fight. But again, Tim Johnson is the beauty of heavyweight MMA. And if his first fight with the PFL is any indication, it may not go long.
It's true, and like I don't know if you saw like this statistical analysis came out. It was I suppose it was more of it was about submissions more than knockouts, which we'll more than likely see here if we do see a finish. But like MMA has become less of like for want of a better term, a puncher's chance sport. Where if you have a great submission game, you can finish someone, or if you have a big punch, you can finish someone. It's becoming less and less that all the time, more predictable, more decisions. Not at heavyweight though, and not at, I suppose, this level of heavyweight, which is just like there isn't many top heavyweights in the world at the moment. We're recording this just before the Tom Aspinall fight, so you know depending on how that result went, he's either you know, made it 3 or 4, or he's made it 2 or 3, that type of thing, you know. So there's very, very few top heavyweights there. And that means lads like Tim Johnson, look at Derek Lewis, like look at the career he's had for a guy with, like, you know, I don't want to say anything too bad about Derek Lewis, but no discernible talent that much in terms of mixed martial arts. But he's had an unbelievable career and fought for a title and the whole lot. Like, Tim Johnson can win this fight. There's no doubt about it. He can go in and he can land a big shot. And the thing about it is, right, I agree with what you said. Denis Goltsov is a massive favourite, and I'll talk more about Denis Goltsov in a second, and he should be a massive favourite. But Denis Goltsov obviously is the guy who, you know, walks into losses. He's, you know, we say, you mentioned about Tim Johnson, you know, what Tim Johnson is going to turn up. That's not the case necessarily with Goltsov, but in the biggest occasion, you know, against Ante Taila losing, against Hinan Fahea losing, against Ali Asiev losing. You know, it's I suppose it's easy to give those examples and bring them up, and they're very different guys to Tim Johnson. And obviously this is the semi-final rather than the final, and not, as you were kind of alluding to there, the best guy in the division at the moment. But at the same time, like, is that a physical or technical thing, or is it a mental thing? Because if it's a mental thing, well, Tim Johnson will test that mentality early, because he'll go out and he'll throw those big shots. So I think that's an interesting mind of it. Now, the other side of it, if we get into maybe the more technical aspects of it for a second, like, Goltsov is one of these guys, and I love that, you know, the PFL heavyweights haven't been kind of like the... How would you want to put this? Like the slop merchants that we see. I'm coming from a slop merchant myself, in the heavyweight division worldwide, I suppose. There's a lot of guys, like, I love a bit of Ante Taila, technical, good, well-rounded fighter. You could say the same about Goltsov, you know, and you know, Maurice Green and Hinan Fahea and others as well over the last few years. So if this fight turns into a striker matchup, I think he can win the striker matchup. I think he's a good jab. He'll hit you hard, but he will take the fight to the ground. He will get on top of you. He will land ground and pound. You know, as I mentioned, how many submissions did I say earlier on? 11 submissions. That's a pretty high rated heavyweight for a guy who also has knockout power. So I think he can win this fight everywhere. Where do you, you know, you kind of alluded to it as well a minute ago, saying that you think he will win it. Not to put words in your mouth, Randy, but where do you think he will win it?
I would see, you know, if I had to make an absolute prediction, it would be probably ground and pound. Just listen, it's heavyweight, and if Tim Johnson's not landing, he's likely getting taken down. Even if he is landing, Goltsov may look for that takedown. And you know, I think at that point, it's whatever Denis Goltsov decides he wants to do. Could he lock up another submission? Yeah, absolutely he could. But for my money, I think we see him kind of, I don't know that we'd see like the first fight when Linton Vassell kind of just gassed out, and, you know, Denis just basically got the victory right there for him. I think he would put him away. And I would say this, Denis Goltsov is good enough to make it a violent finish. Not that stuff matters, but I think ground and pound, I think he could really send a statement as to finally getting over that hump in the PFL heavyweight season.
Another part of that as well is, and I suppose to look before and look after, it's, when you're fighting in the PFL, you have to fight a little bit differently, because you just had 2 tough fights and you know you have another one coming up. That's not always the case. Like, a lot of these fighters can go into a fight and, like, look, they're not going in hoping to get injured, but if they do get injured, they know, well, okay, look, I was hoping to fight in November, maybe I'll have to fight in January instead. Whereas they know they're going to have to fight. Is it November, December? It's towards the end of the year anyway, when this you know, PFL finale card is on. So there's 2 points to that, right? You don't want to add any more damage to what you've already taken, right? And obviously Tim Johnson has a bit of an advantage there, considering he was only in for a few seconds. But you also don't want to jeopardize your preparations for the next fight. Like, you don't want to have to be sitting on the sidelines waiting to get cleared, you know, with a broken hand or a broken foot or whatever. If you can get the fight to the ground, you know, ground and pound someone out, or, you know, and, you know, specifically for the submission as well, if you can choke someone out, it could save yourself a lot of bother. And I think that's something interesting to look at here. I always wonder, and I've asked a few of the guys I've interviewed, and I'm sure you have too, like, what way do you approach this season? Like we saw with Moldavsky this year. Obviously, he's not in the season anymore, and, you know, it was injury, wasn't it, why he pulled out? So, like, that might be part of it. But
yep.
He came into that first fight, he'd one finish, I think, in, what was it, 10, 12 wins as a heavyweight. One knockout, and then he knocks his opponent out. Like, that to me is like, okay, it might be a coincidence, but to me, it's a clear adjustment of strategy coming into a fight, which you have to do, I think, in this PFL season. So just to wrap up the main event, I fancy Goltsov. People love as well, Mike. Just to let you know on this show, they give out to me in the comment section if I don't give my exact predictions and make it very clear. So,
all right,
Denis Goltsov, round 1. Do you know what? I've talked myself into the submission. I'm gonna go for the submission. Are you going for round 1 ground and pound? So
I'm gonna go round 2. Okay. I'm gonna go round 2. Just look, you can't count out Tim after that crazy round we had. Listen, he's not a walkover. We've both said that, right? I think we'll get a little bit of a fight, but for an exact prediction, because I'm a big fan of yours, so I don't want the fans and those that are watching, I don't want to get destroyed in the comments. So I'll say round 2 TKO.
As anyone who watches the shows know, I'm terrible at giving predictions, so your predictions are probably going to be
I hate doing it. Honestly, the respect I have for you, I do it, but I'm like, I never want to upset anyone. Like, I just try to be nice and play good with everybody.
I'll be honest, I don't care about upsetting people. But what I care about, I just like...
That's the difference. It's the yin and yang here.
It is. I just like breaking down the fights and like let the cards fall where they may. Like we'll get the result on Saturday night or Friday night or whenever it is. So yeah, I'm like, what difference does me saying who's going to win really make? But anyway, people like it, and we're here for the people, so we will do that. Let's talk about Popov against Vassell. And like, you have to hand it to Oleg Popov. He was one of these guys, that felt like he was popping up on every Irish card that I was going to, because Bellator were coming for a long while. Now, he didn't manage to get to all of them. I think he only fought in 1, actually, funnily enough, but he's on an unbelievable run. Like, he lost, I think, in one of his first fights back in 2016. That's the only fight he's lost in his career. 18-1 now with 12 finishes. And okay, until I suppose he came over to Bellator and PFL, he hasn't had the level of opponents which you would be hoping for. But his last 3 fights, Gohan Sakaram, I've seen him fight many times as well. A beast. If he hits you, you stay hit. Beat him, beat Steve Mowry, tall Steve, one of the best prospects that's been in Bellator for a while, and now he's beaten Davion Franklin as well. So, and he's looked good about it. I was looking back at my notes and kind of saying, he likes to wrestle, right? He likes to get the fight to the ground, but he's well able to jab you. He's well able to hit you as well. And you probably say the same thing about Linton Vassell. Now, it's funny, a 41-year-old English guy, you're not exactly thinking, right, this guy in the last couple of years has turned into a really good wrestler, but he has. Like, he's just turned into a very well-rounded fighter who has a very good top game. Like, you don't beat Valentin Moldavsky twice in a row, and I know he lost him the first time, without being a very good fighter. And that first fight, he was able to get on top of him and able to land a lot of shots. I think it was Vassell you said it about earlier. You don't know who's going to turn up, which Vassell is going to turn up, or was it maybe it was Tim Johnson you said? But I think the same goes for Vassell. Yeah. The same goes for Vassell though. He can either turn up and he can look amazing, or that Goltsov fight, you alluded to the Goltsov fight earlier, where they got so tired so quickly in that fight and it just went downhill. But then he comes out against Moldavsky and okay, that tough split decision fight, but got a second win and did well in that fight. This is a tougher fight to call, I think. Like, a lot of people are, including myself, look, I'm probably going to pick Popov here, and I think I might, in fact, pick Popov to win the whole thing. We'll get to that in a couple of weeks' time, but I would not rule out Linton Vassell. Like, I'm not ruling out Tim Johnson, but I kind of am, I wouldn't, I would think about picking Linton Vassell here. Do you give him as much of a chance as me, or do you think it's going to be strongly towards Popov here?
I absolutely give Linton Vassell a chance, and, having spoke to him after the Goltsov fight, his reasoning, or not excuse, I should preface that, wasn't an excuse, but he did say he had an energy drink right before the fight, and he threw off his entire kind of just body and energy, and there was a big adrenaline dump in the Goltsov fight. So when you have that, another beautiful thing about the PFL is you could look back at your performance and go, I could get it right the second fight and still possibly get into the playoffs. And yeah, he didn't initially get into the playoffs, but I think you did see. Now, he definitely got tired in that Moldavsky fight. But I think this is a guy who has been battle tested. No disrespect to Oleg Popov or his record, but who's been tested like Vassell? Outside of maybe Denis Goltsov, I think Vassell, outside of Tim Johnson, who we've kind of said what we've had to say about Tim Johnson, I think Vassell's the most battle-tested guy, in these playoffs. And 41 or not, he said something funny to me ahead of this fight here in Nashville. He said, how come when I'm 41 and I lose, they bring up my age, but when I'm 41 and win, they don't bring up my age? And that's a great point. Listen, I think Vassell has more than just a puncher's chance. I think this is going to be very fun. And yes, no elbows, right? Which makes him very dominant and all of that. But I think that's the one negative. But I do think he could be relentless. I give him a better chance in the first half of the fight than I do in the second half.
Yeah, I'm finding it very hard, really, to see, if it goes bad for Popov, because we see that with all fighters, right? At some stage in your career, it's still a winnable fight or a losable fight for you, and some people win those fights and some people lose those fights. Has Popov really been put there yet? Now, will Vassell put him there? That's another question I suppose to ask. But what if that does happen? Where will it go? And the answer to that is not always a positive one. And let's be honest, more than not, it's not a positive one for. And I think especially the heavyweights. It's funny the way it works out. But look, the major factor here for me, if you're deciding if you're getting to the pick here, can Vassell take him down? Can Popov take him down? I think the answer to that will be, it'll be harder for Vassell to take Popov down than Popov to take Vassell down. Who's going to win on the feet? I think as well as Vassell has looked on the ground, I don't know, does he still have the same maybe pop or speed in his striking as he once had? So, I think Popov will probably just have the advantage there. You've given the advantage in the striking and the rest, and I'm going to have to go for Popov here. But I kind of agree with you. I think this could be a fight that goes a little bit longer. Wouldn't it all be surprised if win for a decision? And I think that's the pick. I think Popov to win by decision might be my pick here. What's your pick, or have you any additional kind of analysis on it?
The only thing I would say on this, and I wanted to squeeze it in as a question to you if I can, is what would you make, or what would you say of Popov's performance against a Davion Franklin, right? A Davion Franklin who came in short notice, missed weight. Popov couldn't put him away. Now, people can say, well, Vassell didn't put away Moldavsky. Yeah, not in their last fight. But to me, it's really discouraging and disheartening to see a guy like Oleg Popov. You kind of have everything in your favor in this Davion Franklin fight, and you can't put him away. You showcase your skills for sure, but it was a little bit of a letdown for me.
You might have a better memory than me, but was he safe at any stage during that fight in terms of the point system? Because he had gotten a finish in the second round in the fight before that. Yeah, Tim Johnson was coming in.
I believe he was. So that's something to consider as well. Mm-hmm. But to not, kind of hammer this point home, I was just a little. I thought I could have seen more.
Your point it's a fair point.
You want to protect yourself for sure. But, when the odds are in your favor, I think you want to capitalize on the opportunity, because you could say, hey, let's ride it out to a decision. And I never want to see anyone get hurt. But if you have that mindset of, hey, I'll just let this ride out, what happens at, 450 if you take the wrong step? Now you might have just blown it because you didn't want to get out of there. To answer the question, and people are going to be like, is this the only thing this guy knows how to pick? I'm going to actually go with early second round. I'm going to go another TKO. I'm going to have Linton Vassell.
Interesting. All right, we differ on. We're going to have to keep track of these now, so you see who's the winner and the loser. But I'll be honest, I wouldn't be at all surprised.
I'm definitely the loser here. I'm definitely the loser.
No, definitely that. Very interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing that fight. And let's just quickly touch on the other heavyweight fight on the night. Sergey Bilostenniy, who to me was probably the standout heavyweight this year, didn't make obviously his second fight through injury, I believe. And is coming in here as, like, let's be honest, this is probably an alternate fight, fighting Tyrell Fortune. What do you think of that fight? I know you've spoken to Tyrell and some of the other guys who he's been fighting and stuff, but that's an interesting fight. I'd probably favour Sergey to win that. I was very impressed by him in his opening fight. But any thoughts on that one before we move on to the women's flyweights?
No, I agree with you. I like Sergey in this one as well. Tyrell Fortune is just a character, right? And he said to me, he's like, listen, I'm here to make money. And listen, you make money, you win fights, right? So I don't necessarily love this matchup for him. I agree with you. I think Sergey looked very well early this year. And yeah, good fight. Good fight to show us what could be the future.
100%. Let's talk about the women's flyweight division. And I've waxed lyrical about this division this year because I think it's fantastic. And you only have to look: Ditcheva, Bishop, Santos, Carmouche. I think if I'll answer this question for the both of us. If any of those people won, would be too shocked. I wouldn't be. I think any of the four of them could win. Even Juliana Velasquez, she looked great in her last fight. Unfortunately, obviously didn't get through here. The matchmaking, I would question a little bit. Why was she up against Carmouche in the first round? Maybe because we had 5 and we needed 4 type of thing, and we got 4, but the 4 are very, very good. I think the Ditcheva versus Bishop matchup, and again, just a point is I've made 4 or 5 times already this year, but I want to just quickly make it again. This is the first time we've ever had a competitive women's division in PFL. The first time, because every time it's been one person. Now, one year it didn't turn out that way because, as we know, Pacheco beat Kayla Harrison, but coming into that, it was a one-woman tournament. The next year, Harrison didn't compete. It was a one-woman tournament. All the previous years, what 3 years in a row was it? Harrison, one-woman tournament, one-woman tournament, one-woman tournament. This is a 5-woman tournament. And it's 4 now, but this is really good. We should appreciate this for what it is. And let's talk about Ditcheva versus Bishop, because I think you look at Dakota Ditcheva and she's 12-0. She's fought some good people. Even as an amateur, she fought Shauna Bannon, who by the time this comes out, we'll have seen her fight in the UFC. That was a fantastic fight if people haven't seen it. On her way up, I know some of the people she fought. Kerry Isom is a good fighter. And, you know, she fought in her last couple of fights, Valentina Scatizzi, Chelsea Hackett, Lisa Malden, Cornelia Holm. Not the big standout names, not anyone unbelievable yet. Bishop on the other side of it, then I suppose you could say a similar thing for her until she fought Taila Santos. Looked, it was a close fight. She lost that, but she had Alira Joanna before that. Elena Kalnadu is a very good fighter as well, probably better than anyone that Ditcheva has fought. So, you know, probably a little bit of an advantage from that side of it for Bishop, but Ditcheva has looked probably better and looked a top-notch fighter. I haven't said that right, so I know you watch a lot of young up-and-coming fighters, as do I, obviously a lot of the Irish fighters here. I think there might be a touch of underestimation of Jena Bishop. Like, she is a very good fighter. The performance she put on against Taila Santos, she could have won that fight. Like, there's no doubt about it. Split decision. One judge had her winning that fight. It was fantastic. And I feel like sometimes we have a fighter like Dakota Ditcheva, and it's either some people saying she's going to be a world champion, she's the best in the world, or some people calling her a fraud, right? Neither of those things might be true, and she might win or lose this weekend. I definitely don't think she's a fraud anyway, right? Let's put that out there. I think she could be, I think she could become a world champion. But, you know, will she definitely beat Jena Bishop? No, not definitely. I know, I'll give my pick in a minute, but this is an intriguing fight for me. If you wanted to test someone like Dakota Ditcheva, Mike, Jena Bishop is the perfect test. She can fight on the feet, but she's deadly on the ground, very good on the ground. Her 2 fights before the last one, both won by armbar. You know, another submission on the record as well. Big test for both of them, but the first big test, I suppose, for Dakota Ditcheva.
Listen, I'm going to get a lot of heat for this, so I'm going to just tell the comment section now. Bring the hatred. This is, in my opinion, one of, if not the best fight the PFL has right now, like heading into the playoffs, because you have Jena Bishop, who, as you mentioned, went the distance with Taila Santos. One judge had her winning that fight. What does it say about Jena Bishop early, not early age-wise, but early in her MMA career, that she goes the distance, and I'm not doing MMA math here, I'm just stating facts. She goes the distance with Taila Santos, who went the distance with Valentina Shevchenko. Other people thought Santos won that. So Bishop is like, oh, I've kind of experienced the same thing that, you know, my most recent opponent has. Now she's experiencing the other side of MMA. Everyone's counting her out. Everyone's talking about Dakota. Dakota this, Dakota that. Dakota's in the spotlight. This tournament is for Dakota Ditcheva's taking. But it's not going to be easy, because if it gets to the ground, which we haven't seen Dakota tested that much, like with especially with somebody like Bishop, that's intriguing. The fact that Dakota Ditcheva embraced the striking exchanges against Santos, that makes this interesting. This is not a walk in the park for Dakota Ditcheva, who I think is absolutely a star in the making. Don't think she's there yet, even if she becomes a world champion this year. Don't think she's the next star just yet, but she's well on her way. And what she is she's a result of what PFL is trying to do. She is Exhibit A for the future of PFL.
Yeah, you know what? I'm virgin on picking Jena Bishop here. And I think I might because, and right, if you were to ask me who I think will be the better fighter at the prime of their career, I would say Dakota Ditcheva. But what I look at Dakota Ditcheva's record, and look, as I mentioned, she's fought some good people, no doubt about it. You know, you could argue she's fought better people as an amateur than she has as a pro, which is weird. But I don't know, has she been tested enough to be going into a fight with Jena Bishop like this? I don't know, has she been tested enough? And if it gets to a stage where 2 minutes into the fight, she's been doing well on the feet, maybe winning, and then she gets pulled down, and for the next 3 minutes, it's her against the cage being like, you know, mat returns up, down for maybe, you know, 90 seconds on her back or something like that. When you stand up off that stool in the second round and you take that big breath of air in, are you going to be able to strike like you normally strike, or are you going to be open for another takedown? And if she is open for another takedown, she's going to lose that fight, you know? And I think I might lean Bishop. You're gonna do it. I'm gonna go for Jena Bishop for the. You know, I could change my pick. Watch out for the betting show, right? If the betting odds are a lot different, I can change these picks, right? But I'm gonna go for Bishop by decision. What do you think?
So, because I got to kind of keep the theme going here, I think Jena Bishop is a fantastic fighter. I just wonder if we see it here in the States with other sports that maybe you're really at the top of your game. There's just one other person that's also really at the top of their game. And as much as I think if Dakota's not in this, you know, regular season and playoff, I think it's for Jena Bishop's taking. And that's given respect to Liz Carmouche and Taila Santos. If these three women were still in it, I'd say Jena Bishop's my favorite. But I do think Dakota Ditcheva, I'll say this, I don't think there will be a finish. I think it's going to go to a decision as well. And I think, as you mentioned, has Dakota been tested enough? I think Jena Bishop is the perfect test for her, and she can showcase just how good she is with the decision win. And I'm going to take Dakota Ditcheva by decision.
Interesting. That's good though, because you know it's a sign of good fights that we differ in our picks, I think, and that's there's no harm in that. The next big fight, then obviously the final semi-final fight of PFL 7, I guess PFL 7 it is the aforementioned Liz Carmouche and Taila Santos. Liz has been on an unbelievable run. I interviewed her last year there, or was it last? Yeah, it was last year at this age. And until I interviewed her and looked through the Sherdog page, I hadn't realised what type of run she's on. Like the amount of finishes, the amount of great wins she has had has been absolutely phenomenal. Now, at the same time, has she been as good this year as she was previously? Like, she was getting well and truly beaten by Kana Watanabe with 8 seconds left. That fight was over until she got out the armbar. She's 40 years of age now. She's gone in here against Taila Santos, who, you know, you mentioned went toe-to-toe with Valentina Shevchenko and Erin Blanchfield, who were two of the top fighters in the UFC. You know, okay, Santos wasn't amazing against Jena Bishop in that fight after taking care of Lira Joanna pretty quickly, but I think at this stage of her career, I think this might be a tough matchup for Liz. Like, is she going to catch Taila Santos in a submission? No, she's never been submitted in her career. You know, she's 4 submissions of her own, so she's well able to catch someone as well. I think this might be the end of the long run for Liz, and the reason for it is I don't think she'll be able to cause Taila too many problems on the feet. Now, will she be able to cause problems with her pace and, you know, pushing her back? No, maybe, but Taila Santos has been there and seen a lot of that, you know, fighting against people. Let's say the likes of Molly McCann, Gillian Robertson, Modafferi, that run there of 3 fights, you know, that's kind of what they're trying to do to you as well. And she kind of, you know, beat all of them, unanimous decision against every single one of them. I feel like Santos might have the ability to land her jab, get on the back foot when Liz comes in, maybe get that takedown, get on top, and win the fight there. I'm not 100% sold on my pick, to be honest, but I'm going to go for Santos fight decision. What's your breakdown of that fight?
Really, I think for the first time since the first fight, I think I agree with you. I think the only way Liz does win this fight is by pressuring, kind of keeping it in her control, in her range, but is she going to be able to do that? I wouldn't be shocked to see Santos pull off a late round stoppage, obviously submission or TKO. But I'm going to go Santos by decision as well. It is a fantastic run that Liz Carmouche has had, and this is her first season with the PFL. I think for Liz, whether she's watching this or not, probably not, because she doesn't want to hear my voice again. She's talked to me enough this year. Remove all the narratives. She told me coming into this one, we just spoke last week, that she wanted to show that she could start finishing fights again. And she wanted to stop getting these decision wins. Well, now we're out of the regular season. So now searching for that finish is out of the question. Just win the fight. So maybe that helps Liz Carmouche to say, just do what you have to do to get the win, and we'll see you in the championship. But I just think Santos, she hasn't really been brought down, even in her losses. She's shown she's one of the very best. And, I think she presents a very interesting opposition to whoever she would meet in the finals. So I'm going to ride with you, Sean. I'm going to ride with Santos by decision.
Love it. This undercard, I say, as we mentioned at the top of the show, isn't maybe as strong as some of the other ones. A couple of guys I'd look out for. Cody Law, who's 8-2 now. He was one of these guys who was really talked about as the next big thing coming through in Bellator. And, still a good record at 8-2, but it's had a mixed, I suppose, time of it in his last few fights. I was impressed last time by Sergey, a bit of a wild man against, he's fighting Derek Saunders. And I know you wanted to mention Jaleel Willis as well, fighting against Anthony Ivy. I know you're looking forward to that fight.
I am, just because, Jaleel Willis stepped up, fought Cedric Doumbé in enemy territory, welcomed it. Was kind of a chaotic fight week and a chaotic fight. Now he's going to be able to fight in Nashville. He's from Memphis, Tennessee. So now he's fighting in his backyard. And let's see. Let's see what he, showcases in this really just kind of a spotlight fight for him with the PFL. We've seen him in Bellator. Now let's see what he does here. I think bouncing back against Anthony Ivy sends a big message to where Jaleel Willis is at. And I think we need to give him that credit for, listen, Cedric Doumbé did what Cedric Doumbé did. But I think Jaleel Willis, he's not a write-off. And not only does he get an opportunity against Anthony Ivy, but he gets it in his home state. It should be a fun one.
100%. Mike, thank you very much for joining me. If you're not following him, check him out on Twitter. What is it? MP2310? Is that it?
Yeah, MP2310. Yeah, I made it I've been on Twitter so long. I made it when I was in high school, which is 2010. So I've been on Twitter for about 14 years. So I don't know that I'll ever change it unless someone, gives me a job where they're like, hey, can you just change this up? I'll change it up. But for now, it works. It's easy to tweet. MP2310.
Love it. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much for everyone for tuning in. Enjoy the fights this weekend, and we'll see you all next time.